Hello everyone and welcome back to Kobean History. Today we are in London and we are gonna have a look at all the foot tunnels under the Thames. Yes, this is a part of London that is overlooked most of the time, but you can all actually walk underneath the river. I won't be talking about all the tunnels where the tubes now go through under the river, because there's a lot of tube lines that go through tunnels under the river. But in this video I will just talk about the tunnels where you could walk through, or that you once could walk through in the past. This also includes the very first tunnel in the world that was dug under a navigable river. And this is the Thames Tunnel, but before the success of the Thames Tunnel, which I will talk to you about in a bit, there were some attempts before the Thames Tunnel.
In 1799, the engineer Ralph Todd tried but failed to dig a tunnel between Gravesend and Tilbury. The reason a tunnel was proposed to be built here was that there was at the time a big need for transport of army troops from Essex to Kent, as in case a war would break out, troops would have to be moved here by ferries, which would take a long time, and a tunnel here would speed up the troop movements by a lot. And to be honest, it seemed a little ambitious, especially when looking at the map. This is where he tried to build it, and considering nowhere in the world had ever dug a tunnel underneath a navigable river, he might have had a little more luck if he tried a little upstream first. And that is what a group of Cornish miners tried to do between 1805 and 1809. They decided to try and connect Rotherhithe and Wapping. However, they failed as well due to the difficult conditions of the ground. The Cornish miners were used to mining hard rock and used the same methods to try and dig this tunnel. But the ground here was not made of hard rock, instead it was soft clay and quicksand. So this project was abandoned after the initial pilot tunnel had been dug and had flooded twice. The next person to make an attempt at tunneling under the Thames was Mark Brunel, who was the father of the famous Isambard Kingdom Brunel. In 1823, Brunel produced a plan for a tunnel between Rotherhithe and Wapping, which would be dug using his new patented tunneling shield. The story of the construction of the Thames Tunnel is quite long and there were many ups and downs, so I will cover the finer details of how the Thames Tunnel was dug in a separate video. So we'll skip ahead to November of 1841, when the tunnel was finally completed. The following year, the Thames Tunnel was fitted out with lights, roadways and a spiral staircase, and the tunnel finally opened to the public on March 25th, 1843. The tunnel was a triumph of engineering and quickly became a major tourist attraction. About 2 million people passed through it every year, each paying a penny as a toll. Even though it was a huge success in terms of engineering and was widely popular with the people of London as well as tourists visiting the city, sadly however it failed to be a financial success due to the huge amount of money it had taken to build and complete it. So the tunnel was eventually sold off to the East London Railway Company in 1865. So 22 years after it had first opened to the public, the tunnel ceased to be a pedestrian walkway, and it would now be converted into a railway tunnel, with the first trains being run through it in 1869. In 1884, the tunnel's disused construction shaft to the north end of the river was repurposed to serve as Wapping Station, which is still Wapping Station today. And in fact, if you go to Wapping Station, you actually go down the shaft to get to your train.
Yeah, so the Thames Tunnel. Here is Wapping Station, where the northern entrance used to be, and it used to go all the way under the tunnel and come out over there somewhere. We will have a look in a moment where it came out.
Oh whoa! This is like the coolest staircase for an overground station.
Yeah. So this used to be the shaft from the Thames Tunnel. So that's why it's quite nice. I think they renovated this station as well like a few years ago, so the rest looks nice too. So yeah, this is the tunnel the Victorian people would have used to walk under the Thames through the Thames Tunnel. Now we can't walk through the Thames Tunnel anymore, so we'll take the overground under the river. So this is the Brunel Museum. The original building was actually the southern entrance shaft to get into the Thames Tunnel. Of course, you can't go through there anymore because now the railway runs underneath it. But this was the original entrance tunnel. If you see those depictions of the Thames Tunnel, the Grand Hall, that used to be here. In addition to that, this building also was a utility building to maintain the shaft under the tunnel, under the River Thames. This building also housed two water pumps, steam-powered water pumps, which would pump the water which would leak in the tunnel from the Thames. And another indication of where the tunnel entrance used to be, we can see the road name there, which is Tunnel Road. In 1869, a tunnel was dug here, right by the Tower of London, which is just over there. This tunnel was a lot smaller than the Thames Tunnel, which had closed a few years earlier for the pedestrians. The Tower subway, as this tunnel came to be known, wasn't actually intended for pedestrians either. In 1870, a railway was put in this tunnel, and a cable-hauled wooden carriage would bring passengers from one end to the other. This system proved to be quite expensive to maintain, and the company who operated the tunnel went bankrupt only a few months after. Afterwards, this became a pedestrian tunnel, and people had to pay a toll of a halfpenny to use it. This was a success, and a lot of profit was made from the tunnel. But in 1894, the Tower Bridge opened. This bridge didn't charge a toll, so the tunnel became outcompeted and closed 4 years later in 1898. The tunnel still exists under the river today, but you can't walk through it anymore, and it's just used to house water mains now. This structure, right by the Tower of London, is the only thing that remains above ground of the Tower subway tunnel. You can see over here 1868 when it was constructed, and this was the northern entrance to the tunnel. So the people would have come down here, down some stairs, then walked under the river, which is over there, and then they would have come out over there somewhere where those modern buildings are now. So yeah, this is the northern entrance to the Tower subway, which is, funnily enough, right next to the Tower of London subway.
Next up is the Blackwall Tunnel, which started construction in 1892 and was opened to the public in 1897. Originally, this tunnel both supported pedestrian and road traffic. By the 1930s, the capacity the tunnel could hold was already becoming inadequate for the amount of traffic that was going through there every day. So in 1967, a second Blackwall Tunnel opened, and that's why nowadays there are two Blackwall tunnels. Nowadays, these tunnels aren't open to pedestrians anymore and only handle road traffic. The tunnel handling the northbound traffic is the original 19th century tunnel, and the southbound one is the one that was built in 1967.
It seems like as one foot tunnel under the Thames closes, another one opens, because this tunnel where we are at now, the Greenwich foot tunnel, started construction in 1899, and it was completed 3 years later in 1902. This is actually one of the only tunnels and oldest tunnels that you can still walk through to get under the Thames. It was built because it replaced an unreliable ferry that came from here and brought you to the other side, to the Isle of Dogs over there, as a lot of the workers lived on this side of the river and had to get to the docklands on the other side of the river to get to work. So this tunnel replaced this unreliable ferry, and then the people could just walk under the river without having to wait on the ferry. So we also have the Rotherhithe Tunnel. This one was opened in 1908, and originally it was for horse-drawn carriages as well as pedestrians. but as you can see now it's just a road going through it. This links Rotherhithe, south of the Thames, to Limehouse, I believe it is, north of the Thames. It is technically still a pedestrian tunnel, but it's not recommended to go through it because of all the cars, and because it is under the Thames, it's not really well ventilated. So if you do decide to walk through it, you might not come out that well on the end, thanks to all the pollution and the smoke. So yeah, as you can see, we'll go a little closer. You do have a small narrow pathway if you do want to take on the challenge.
It makes me nervous how close the cars have to go to each other. Like they're taking up that full lane. They've got a little emergency phone too.
Okay, so we've just entered the tunnel. As you can see, it's quite a long tunnel. So if you do decide to walk through it, you can't just give up halfway. There's also no buses in here, so also no buses you can take out. And we've just, as you can have a look around how far we're in the tunnel. And at the beginning I was like, oh, this isn't too bad, but at the moment, this far in the tunnel, I can already taste all the fumes in my mouth. So I guess that's enough for us. We're gonna go back out. Okay, so now we're at Woolwich, and we have another Thames tunnel where we can walk under the Thames, similarly to the Greenwich Thames tunnel. This one was built 10 years later in 1912. It had the same purpose though, getting workers from this side of the river to the docks over there. Over there you have the Royal Docks and nowadays also the city airport, London City Airport. So yeah, this building you can kind of see it's kind of similar to the Greenwich. It's got that like circular design to the entrance. It wasn't actually designed by the same person, and I'd even say this is like the worst cousin to the Greenwich Tunnel, because you can already see it's not really that hard to find nowadays, because it's behind this building, which is a swimming pool, I believe. I don't know if it's better, if it's more visible on the other side. We'll see once we walk through. But yeah, you kind of have to know where it is to utilize it. This also still has a ferry going through it, so you can also take the ferry if you have a car. So yeah, now we'll go inside the tunnel, see how it is.
If you'd like to see more, on screen right now will be one of my London walk videos where we actually walk through the Greenwich and Woolwich tunnels. And on screen you can also find my London history playlist. I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, especially my $25 patrons G. David and Parker Dye.